Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone to the March 15th school board meeting for Benicia Unified School District. We're having some technical difficulties, but that's okay. We're going to roll with this. I'd like to start with roll call, please. Mrs. Jensen?
President Perucci?
Here.
Trustee Holguin? Here. Trustee Monette?
Here.
Trustee Morgan?
Here.
Trustee Wing?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have nothing to report out from closed session, so I am going to invite everybody to please stand and join us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like an approval of the agenda as it's written, please.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The agenda is passed. Thank you.
Instructional culture.
Okay, we have a highlight to this night. So Dr. Young, can you share with us about your instructional coaches, please?
Good evening, trustees. Good evening, everybody. Had an opportunity to join us this evening. So this is the part of the board meeting that I think it's always certainly one of my favorite agenda items is a highlight. And so I'd like to welcome Ms. Rice to the podium, and she's going to talk about our instructional coaches, and she has some of her team members here. And this is an effort that we're very proud of, and they're going to share their successes with us. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, cabinet members, students, teachers, and community members. My name is Stephanie Rice, and I'm coordinator of education services here. And I'm here with two of our instructional coaches, Deb Campbell and Kelly Hughes, who serve our elementary schools. It's my privilege tonight to highlight our coaching, student-centered coaching model here in BUSD. I gotta get used to the clicker. This coaching model has really strengthened our ability to support our teachers here in Benicia Unified. It's really a reciprocal relationship. Our coachees, the teachers working with our coaches, get to have on-the-job support working with their actual students on a focus that they choose and come together with their coaches. In turn, our coaches really benefit as well, learning from our coaches and the students they're working with, increasing their toolkit so that when they go on to work with their next coachee, they have more tools to share as well. Some of the ways they work with our teachers are through co-teaching, modeling. They provide professional development, both district-wide and small groups, grade level collaboration, and they also help with data analysis and provide research. Currently, we have 2 elementary full-time coaching positions. We have 1 full-time coach and then 2 part-time coaches that share. We also have a full-time BMS math coach and a tech integration coach who serves both elementary and middle school. Some of our coaches could not be here tonight. Alberto Barcinas, this depicts him working in some of his coaching cycles, working with his primary students. He's right now at a workshop so that he can bring some things back to our teachers. There's one more there. Okay. He wrote something for me to share with you. Coaching has been the greatest professional experience in my 13 years of teaching. It has given me the opportunity to collaborate with amazing educators in our district and meet the creative, hardworking, and curious students in our schools. I have enjoyed integrating tech tools, but most of all, I have grown immensely from the relationships I have built with my colleagues. They have built my confidence, provided me with constructive criticism, and supported me both in my successes and failures. I feel blessed to say that 13 years of my career, I love it more than ever. And that's our tech integration coach. Lisa Golson, our BMS math coach, actually is volunteering at Mary Farmer's STEAM night tonight, so that's where she is. And she gave me some words as well. I have found coaching to be an immense challenge and an immense pleasure. Every time I am invited into someone else's classroom, I am humbled by what we do. I have been able to support my colleagues in the task of educating students in many ways. I have worked as a consultant and information gatherer for my department. I have helped individuals and teams to analyze their classroom practices and student results. Encouraging a teacher to explore their thinking or to try something new has been very rewarding, but seeing the change in student engagement has been amazing. Coaching is hard work for both teacher and coach, but the strengths that it can develop in both of them are worth it. I know that hundreds of students have learned more and enjoyed the process more because of what we have done this year. I believe coaching is an investment in our teachers that will pay off for many years to come. So that's Lisa Golson, our BMS math coach. So I told you I'm working on that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Deb Campbell, elementary coach.
Good evening, board. It's good to be here. And before, I just don't want you to have to. Yeah, I like being here. You know that. Before I begin, I want to thank the board and the district for the opportunity to continue in this position. This year, I am a full-time elementary instructional coach. I work now at Mary Farmer Elementary, and I also work at Robert Semple Elementary, and I've had the pleasure of working with our dedicated staff for the last 6 to 8 months, and it's an amazing experience. I'm working right now with, it's a very interesting time, but I'm working with 5th grade students, and I'm working with K1 students. So it's a very interesting time, I must say. My heart, of course, after 28 years is in the 5th grade classroom. But my credential tells me that I'm a K3 specialist in elementary education. That was what my intention was when I first came into the district. And so I am in kindergarten and learning so very much. And if you want to just go one more slide. Whoops, too fast, back one. So that was our Lorax day at the elementary level. At Mary Farmer Elementary, all the kids, it was Dr. Seuss week, and all the kids were wearing mustaches, so what the heck. I put one on too. But what I want you to understand about this experience is it has changed me as an educator. And regardless of where I am next year, coach or teacher, I will not be the same because it has been an experience that has transformed my teaching. And the one thing I want to say is that I have to give kudos out to every K1 teacher in the district. It is an amazing job that they have to do to teach children how to read and write. The process of taking and making sense of your world with words and learning to understand that we don't comprehend it as adults. We only comprehend it when we watch a 5-year-old try to do it. And the work that the 5-year and 6-year-olds are doing in this district, oh my goodness, I just ran goosebumps, is amazing. Reader Writer Workshop, I can't say enough about it. It's my heart. And the kids are doing phenomenal work. And I really have like 1,000 pieces of paper in my classroom to give to you so you could read it all. But the truth is they're reading and writing by the end of K. And it's amazing what they can do. So I want to thank you again. I want to thank our teachers for inviting me into the classrooms that I get to work in. I call them myself Dracula. I have to be invited in. So I feel really honored to be working with the staff at Mary Farmer and the staff at Robert Semple. Thank you very much. I know we only have 5 minutes.
And now we have Kelly Hughes working with Joe Henderson Elementary.
Well, it's going to be really hard to follow that now. I echo so much of what Deb said. This is my 2nd year as an instructional coach, 2nd year as a coach for Joe Henderson. It's my home school. I've been there 11 years. I had the wonderful opportunity to job share with Deb Campbell last year, and this year I'm job sharing with Colleen Liang, who couldn't be here, but I have words to share from her as well. But again, I everything that Deb said, I feel it's been an amazing opportunity for me. We're the ones supposed to be helping, and coaching teachers, but I feel like I get just as much back from the experience, as I hope that the teachers and the students do. These are some examples. This is probably, in the 2 years I've been doing this, my absolute favorite coaching moment. This was working in a first grade classroom. The teacher asked me to come in. She wanted to just dig deeper into her writing unit of study. She really wanted me to model the lessons so that she could learn from that and be able to do that and replicate that on her own when I wasn't there. And normally I'm a little hesitant to do that. Normally it's I'll do, you do, just like we do with the kids, and then we can do it together. But I was willing to do that because every time I went and modeled a lesson, I would look up at the kids, of course, but then I would see the teacher in the back, and she was writing notes, and she was interacting and asking questions, and that was a pretty cool experience. And it's hard to see from these pictures, but I taught first grade once, and I remember what it's like to have to teach writing to first graders, and it can be a struggle. And we started off the unit, and it was, a few words here and there, maybe a period if we were lucky, a capital letter. And by the end, they were writing informational books, and these kids were blowing us away. They were writing chapters. And yes, it's first grade, so a chapter for a first grader is 5 or 6 sentences, but those of you in the education world know that 5 or 6 sentences from a 6 or 7-year-old is phenomenal. And they learned how to use checklists to self-assess, and I could go on and on about that experience because it's just, it really warmed my heart. And so besides that, I'm a teacher that loves to collaborate. I don't like to be in my classroom alone. I love to bounce ideas off of each other. And so I've gotten that out of it as well. And I get to work with a variety of teachers. This was our celebration. See, I was just bragging about my first graders because they were so awesome. But I loved everything I love everything about the experience of coaching and working with my colleagues and supporting them. And the other great thing is being a 5th grade teacher. I get to see the progression from K all the way to 5. I've actually worked with some middle school teachers and able to see some of that as well, and that's a really cool experience. You don't always get to see that as a teacher, so it's neat to see that what you're doing in 5th grade, they're doing the same thing, just with a little bit more scaffolding in 4th and 3rd and all the way down. So that's been very, very rewarding. And then, let me share. Okay, so my dear friend Colleen Liang, who couldn't be here, her son's receiving an award tonight at the high school. So she's a proud mom. She needed to be there. But I told her I would share her thoughts. And so Colleen coaches at Matthew Turner. And Colleen says that she loves working with students in K-5 and recognizing the learning progression across all grades. She enjoys collaborating with teachers and working in partnerships to create goals for student success. She loves building relationships with students and staff at the coaching site. And finds that it strengthens relationships across all schools. And Colleen has enjoyed coaching, both learning and growing as a teacher and professionally. That's her favorite thing, is just learning alongside other teachers.
So I'm going to wrap this up. We've heard from our coaches, and now we're going to just hear some quotes from the teachers that worked with our coaches. When you need to innovate, implement, and navigate new technology or curriculum, calling coaches helps motivate, inspires, and collaborates. Our coach is never afraid to take you by the hand and encourage you to try something new. If she does not know, she'll find out, so she can pass that knowledge on to you. The coaching extra support from Lisa has benefited me and my students by allowing me to reflect on my classroom management and practice, introducing me to new ways to teach or reinforce math concepts to students, supporting students who need intervention with tutoring sessions, and creating a positive and exploratory mindset in our various discussions. She's a bridge to 7th grade and earlier grades to explore common themes in mathematics, providing data to inform instruction. Coaching with Kelly has had a positive influence on both ELA and math for my classroom. Besides the fact that the kids love to have her in class, she helped me take the plunge into workshop. Managing conferring in small groups can be especially overwhelming, but she was able to bring these to life and showed me strategies to incorporate them into the classroom. I just have to say that I think having Deb work with our team has made us stronger and an extremely cohesive team. Also, the way that the coaching model is set up is so accessible. As a teacher that is at the beginning of my career, having the opportunity to work with a coach and have the opportunity to grow alongside them has been more than necessary for me. She helped me to believe in myself again when I was ready to give up on teaching. I feel so comfortable with the workshop model now, and I would not at all feel that way if it wasn't for our coaching sessions. Alberto is so incredibly patient and kind, and working with him makes everything seem and look easy. He has the best, most positive approach to teaching and learning and helps you to feel successful too. I appreciate that he always is learning, that's where he is now, and always willing to teach and share what he has learned. I feel supported while taking chances, and that is a scary place to be in front of 150 students, and excited when I know we get to work together for a cycle. We are lucky to have a coach like Alberto in Benicia. If only he could just spend the whole year at my school site. To wrap this up, BUSD's coaching model provides opportunity to strengthen our teaching and our curriculum, both with our coaches and with our teachers, all in the name of for our students. And I'm going to end with a quote. Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. Henry Ford. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. That was excellent.
You know, I'd like to share while we're waiting. I have actually heard from different teachers about the amazing work you're doing, and I've been in these ladies' classrooms when they were teaching as well. They are an amazing, invaluable resource to our district, and I just need to thank you again publicly for all that you're doing for us and for our staff. Thank you. We're going to start with our student reports this evening. Gentlemen, do you have something to share for us?
Hello, I'm Christian Chavez, the ASB Vice President at Benicia High School, and I'm going to be sharing some past events with you from our school. So recently we held our blood drive. I believe that was March 2nd. Yeah, and that was a huge success. We had a lot of donations and very little deferrals, so we had a lot of blood come in. And then leadership had just finished the annual interviews for next year's incoming class, and voting ended today, so the winners will be announced tomorrow, Friday, at the end of the day. And then yesterday, we held a national walkout at our school in which we had students speak and give their thoughts on the issues at hand. The League of Women's Voters were on site, and registered and pre-registered students, about 50 of the students were able to do that. And many of our students took part in a sources of strength activity called What's Your 17, which looked for ways that the students could have a more positive outlook and influence on our school. And then along with that, the bands held music in our schools yesterday, which was really exciting, big success. And spring sports have begun, and although most of them were rained out this week, badminton's off to a really good start with big wins over AC and Vallejo.
All right, hello everybody. My name's Alex Torres. I'm the ASB president at Benicia High School, and I'll be talking about some upcoming events. So this Sunday is the grad night fundraiser luau. So I suggest you guys go to that. It should be lots of fun and nice dancing and stuff like that. And then next week we have a Spirit Week, following by a rally that Friday. So I'll say the Spirit Week's days real quick. On Monday it's Elements Day, so you can dress like Earth, wind, fire, or a scientist, stuff like that. Tuesday is Shredding Day, so you can dress like a surfer, a skier, or shredded food. Wednesday is Harry Potter Day, so you can dress like your favorite wizard or your favorite house, you Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw. Thursday is Meme Day. That's a funny day. And then Friday is our CPT rally day, and it's a Black light rally, and the theme is Out of This World Aliens Day. So that should be a pretty cool theme and day. And then also that Friday is the Benicia Bay Winter Review in the gym. It should be taking over the whole school. And then the following week, we have our annual March Madness basketball tournament, and that will be happening all week. And then March 27th, BHS is hosting the DUI court for the seniors. And that's all.
Yep. Sounds interesting. All right, our next report is from our superintendent.
Thank you. Very well done. So just curious, so like, what would be one shredded food? I've never heard of that before.
Shredded cheese.
Okay. All right.
That's a little cheesy.
Thank you, guys. So just a couple of quick things for me. That one of the, actually, you mentioned both of them. I really wanted to acknowledge, as superintendent, how proud I am of all the kids in the district and the staff yesterday during that 17 minutes, where as a community, man, I was really proud of everybody because I thought the kids were dignified, they were thoughtful, they were respectful at the high school. The leadership team reached out to the principal to share your thoughts. As the adults running the district were like, oh my God, I hope this goes off. Well, we didn't know because it didn't go that way throughout the country. There were some places where it didn't feel like that. So I just wanted to thank you guys and recognize our students and our staff for really taking that moment and capturing the intent of it, which was to spend 17 minutes in quiet reflection for that horrible event. So well done. And last one real quick, I was also with Dr. Gill. We went to the Music in Our Schools event last night, and it was awesome just to watch the progression of students' development in music as they work through our system. They got all the way to jazz band at the high school, and they're just incredible. And I went home and was hanging out with my family for a little bit, and I recorded it, and I tweeted a couple of them, and I put it on the speaker. And my son said, "Well, Dad, who is that? They are amazing." And I said, "Yes, they are. That's a jazz band at the high school." So anyway, hats off to that group, and Mr. Martin and Mr. Walt came back and helped us out as well, and our elementary music teacher, Mr. Guevara. So there it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, if you'd like to leave now. You know you've got homework to do, right? Nope. You said that on TV,
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, board reports?
I can start. I was able to attend the Benicia Education Foundation meeting on Monday, and we had a really great meeting, a good turnout. Lots of folks talking about how we can best support BUSD. And we talked about one event that has already occurred, and that was having all of the sophomores take the PSAT at the high school. And they had over 90% participation at the high school, which was fantastic because that sets up our students to be better prepared for scholarships or have more access to scholarships and be prepared to continue on their college path. So it was great to hear that went well for the first try with that project. The second big news was that the board voted to continue to fund the elementary wheel, which is a $50,000 commitment. So next year that the elementary wheel will continue at all of the elementary schools. 2 schools have it at the first semester and 2 schools in the second semester. Yes, so BEF, yes, that. And so BEF is proud to be able to help continue that project because we feel it's very useful and wonderful for our students and our teachers and our families. So, thank you.
Sure. I went to I'm part of the grad night committee, and so that's coming along really well. They mentioned the luau. Luau is a fundraiser for grad night, and tickets are on sale for $40 until Saturday. After Saturday, there's no more tickets. So if you're interested, BeniciaGradNight.net, and purchase your tickets through there. And that's...
You want to do the run for education since I forgot?
What's the date? I forget. It's
April 22nd
April-
is the
yes.
Benicia Run for Education, where we get all the money to do things like fund the wheels. So please come out and join us. We need runners, walkers, volunteers, all of the above. Thank you. Yes. I was reading his notes.
I'm just going to put in a plug for Mary Farmer's auction that's on the 24th. And it's Blues and Brews, which I can't say no to that, right? And also I was at the band performance last night, which was super fun. It was the caliber of the musicianship and the work that goes in from the people who are the band directors and the teachers and all the parents and the booster programs. I'm always like amazed by it. And yeah, it was really fun. And it was really well organized, and jazz went first, which was great. It was a great way to start it off. I thought it was, anyway, I could go on forever. I'll stop.
Mr. Morgan?
I wanted to actually tag on to what you said, Dr. Young, about yesterday and the leadership at the high school, but also reflect broadly on the leadership in this district and how lucky we are at leadership. And the reason I was reflecting on it was on Monday, in the New York Times, journalist, columnist, David Brooks, writes a lot about character, wrote a very, I thought, good article about good leaders make good schools. And I just want to read a few paragraphs from it because I think it embodies what we see here in Benicia, and we need to foster that and not forget how important leadership is for the schools. And the article was on Monday, if anybody's interested, but it begins, the solutions to the nation's problems already exist somewhere out in the country. We just do a terrible job of circulating them. For example, if you want to learn how to improve city schools, look how Washington, New Orleans, and Chicago are already doing it. Since 2011, the graduation of Chicago public schools has increased at nearly 4 times national average. The percentage of Chicago students going to 2- or 4-year colleges directly after graduation increased to 63% in 2015 from 50% in 2006. These improvements are proof that demography is not destiny, that bad things happening in a neighborhood do not have to determine student outcomes. And then it goes on to talk about how is Chicago doing it. And it says, we've spent a lot of time over the past few decades debating how to restructure schools. We spent a lot of time trying to help teachers, but structural change and increasing teacher quality don't get you very far without a strong principal. Researchers from the University of Minnesota and the University of Toronto studied 180 schools across 9 states and concluded, quote, we have not found a single case of a school improving its student achievement record in the absence of talented leadership. What do principals do? They build a culture. Researchers from McKinsey studied test scores from 500,000 students in 72 countries. They found that students' mindsets were twice as powerful in predicting scores as home environment and demographics. How do students feel about their schooling? How do they understand motivation? Do they have a growth mindset? Do they understand, I gotta scroll down, their own development? These attitudes are powerfully and subtly influenced by school culture, by the liturgies of practice that govern the school day, the rituals for welcoming members into the community, the way you decorate the walls to display school values, the distribution of power across the community, the celebrations of accomplishment, and the quality of trusting relationships. Principals set the culture by their very behavior. The message is the person. Research suggests that it takes 5 to 7 years for a principal to have full impact on schools, but most principals burn out and leave in 4 years or less. Chicago has one of the highest principal retention rates of any large urban system, 85%. Principals are given support, training, and independence. If you manage your school well for a couple of years in a row, you are freed from the daily oversight from the central office. But the big thing is transforming the role. Principals used to be administrators and middle managers overseeing budgets, discipline, and schedules. The goal was to be strong and decisive. Today's successful principals are greeting parents and students outside the front door in the morning. That Minnesota-Toronto study found successful principals made 20 to 60 spontaneous classroom visits and observations per week. In other words, they are high energy types constantly circulating through the building, offering feedback, setting standards, applying social glue. In some schools, teachers see themselves as martyrs in a hopeless cause. Principals raise expectations and alter norms. At Independence Middle School in Cleveland, Principal Jacob pushes a stand-up desk on wheels around the school all day. Research also suggests a collaborative power structure is the key. A lot of teachers want to be left alone, and a lot of principals don't want to give away power. But successful schools, as we just heard, are truly collaborative. The Wallace Foundation website recently described the exemplary activism of a Kentucky principal, Dewey Hensley. In his first week, he drew a picture of a school on a poster board and asked the faculty members to annotate it together. Let's create a vision of a school that's perfect. When we get there, then we'll rest, he told them. School governance was led by a simple structure of 3 committees populated and headed by teachers. Hensley also visited the homes of the 25 most disruptive students. When you learn about successful principals, you keep coming back to the character traits that embody and spread: energy, trustworthiness, honesty, optimism, and determination. We went through a period when we believed you could change institutions without first changing the character of the people in them, but we were wrong. Social transformation follows personal transformation. And I can tell you, in my time with the district, I have seen that. I've seen that at the high school. My daughter went to high school during a difficult time with different leadership. My son's there now, was there yesterday, and it's just a remarkable transformation. My youngest son is at Matthew Turner, and Mr. Slater, I'm convinced, has twins because he's everywhere. He's greeting the kids in the morning, he's opening the car doors, he's there in the afternoons. I see him in the evenings at the book events, where he's telling me he's next day going off to Odyssey of the Mind for the weekend down in San Jose. It's remarkable the energy they bring to the district. And we're very, very fortunate to have them, and I appreciate everything they do. So just wanted to add that.
Okay, well, you're a tough act to follow, Mr. Morgan, but one comment I'd like to make about a visit that I had this week in our district. I was invited to score a debate that was going on in a 5th grade class at Henderson. So it happened to be in Miss Hughes and Miss Liang's class, and the debate was, they were debating. And I was having such a good time. I'm sitting there with my little score sheet and I'm remembering my classroom days. It was like, oh yeah, this used to be such a great thing to do. And when I was all done, and the kids had such an amazing command of their topic, of their material, that they were able to present such viable arguments. And I was really kind of disappointed because the topic was white milk versus chocolate milk. Well, you're talking to a chocolate queen here. And it was really hard because I had a hard time justifying the chocolate milk at the end because they were giving such good information and they had all this data, and people were asking them, we were asking them lots of questions after to kind of justify their position and to, and they were just very calm, and they said, well, it's really quite evident. And I'm going, no, it's not. I don't want to believe that it's better. But anyways, they did an amazing job. And clearly the credit goes to the classroom teachers. I think you guys were amazing. And I know it's what you are all bringing when you're coaching our classrooms and our teachers with our programs. So I have to say hats off to you all. But I did really, really have a good time. So thank you for the invitation. So with that said, to my board members, I have, to my colleagues, I have an update from my journey to Sacramento the other day. Needless to say, it was pouring that day that I was in Sacramento, but I was able to visit with our 3 legislators. I was able to visit with Jim Frazier, Tim Grayson, and Senator Dodd as well, so Bill Dodd. So we had about 4 or 5 messages that we were bringing forward. One was on the full and fair funding, and we were asking them to vote yes, and the bill is actually AB 2808. And what that is that over the next couple of years, the idea is that we want the state to raise the base that each district is given with their money through LCFF with the base grant from to bring it up to the state average. That is the first step, the state average, and then to eventually get to the national average, which is over $12,000 a student. So I know, shake your head. It's staggering numbers, but it's, oh my God, what an amazing difference that would be. And what was interesting is when we had the conversation, you know, at one point, California was number 5 in state funding in the nation, and we have now slipped down to a very comfortable 41. So the idea is, the goal of this bill is at least get us in the top 10. You know, again, we are the 6th largest world economy, and we are sitting at 41% with what we value for our students. So with that said, that was the main thrust of our meeting. The other one was, of course, to expedite Prop 51. All of us as taxpayers and voters approved Prop 51, which is the school facility money. And right now, they've only agreed to push out about $600,000 of this money. And what we're saying is you need to release the $3 billion, or I guess $600 million. And you need to release the $3 billion, that the taxpayers have voted for this. We all voted last year on this prop, and it's still sitting there, yet to be released. So we were pushing for that. We also were pushing for what they call the Budget Act, which is support with the pension costs. And we were trying to really emphasize that we support our teacher pensions, we want them to continue, but you need to help us to make them become viable. And that as the pension costs continue to take a greater impact on our budgets, we can do less and less to support our students and our community. So we're asking for the Budget Act. The other thing that we were pushing for is AB 2228. That's the wildfire support bill, and it's meant to support Sonoma County, the wildfires and the floods within the rest of the state of California, and that's helping them to recoup their ADA. Schools were closed for so long, and schools right now are out a lot of money, and what we're trying to do is to make sure that the state compensates them in some way for what they've lost. AB 1951 is the Pathways to College Act. And what this is an opportunity to look at our assessments and to say that our 11th graders who normally take these, I was going to call SBAC, it's not SBAC anymore, it's the CASP, okay. That in fact, at 11th grade, they take the SAT or they take the ACT instead at 11th grade, which would help them with their requirements to get into college. And then, of course, the AB 3149, which is our substitute teacher permits. And what it would really talk about, and I think it's really important, and we asked them to vote yes on this, is that substitute teachers right now can only substitute for 30 days, and then they have to leave the classroom. And we talked about how negative that is for students, because kids have a sub for 30 days, and then the next 30 days they come, and it's like, so who's doing my grades? Where's the continuity? What's happening to them? So this would waive that 30-day limitation, so that in fact, when a teacher is out on leave, the sub could stay and create that continuity for the students and support students. So that was my day. I spent the entire day there. It was actually really enlightening to talk to lots of other board members and administrators that were there. So that's the latest update.
I have a question. I'm wondering if there's a place that myself and the public can find these, this legislation.
Actually, they're all on CSBA's website,
Okay.
and I've pushed it out a couple of times on my Facebook if folks want to go up and do. And I've actually had 4 parents who have emailed me this past week because they've been hearing me talk about it at every board meeting, if I'd give them some information so they can contact the legislators as well. And I've been putting it out, so I mean, I'm happy to do it. And I don't know if we could put the information out on our website. Maybe if we could find that out. I don't know if that's okay, because these are political things. On our board section of the link. I mean, I'd be happy to give that over if Betty, if Dr. Young, if we find that. Okay, if we could find out if we can do it, I'd be happy to share.
Yeah, I think it's just great for the public to know that this legislation's out there. And, I think a lot of you are here because, financial issues that we're facing in the district, and our lack of finances and money is a big part of, the conundrum we're all in. So, I really encourage, I'm going to be calling my legislators. I encourage everyone else to do it because it makes a difference if you call. It really does.
Yep, it does make a difference. They love hearing from families. They said they want to hear from parents, and they wanted to hear, and they wanted stories. They wanted to know specifically what would be our concern, what things we would be cutting, what things that students would be losing. So please feel free. But those are the three, because someone sent me a list on an email today, and they were people that they weren't in our area at all. So those are our three people to target.
We passed a resolution last week supporting the
Correct.
family, so we could post that, a link to the.
Right.
Definitely
That's
have
right.
that one. And, you know, they really do listen when you call, and I usually call on my commute into work this morning because I have a long commute, so I call them on my way in. It's something for me to do. And they call me back sometimes, which is kind of surprising. And so they do pay attention. I thought it was a robocall when Bill Dodd called me the other day.
Yes, he does.
And it's more effective to call than to email too. So emails typically go into algorithms, and I mean, I don't know if it's as much so on the state level, but it's much more effective if you want to make an impact on your legislators to call, even if you just leave a message. So anyway.
Right. I would encourage you to connect and support us that way, and tell them we want yes votes. Okay, so with that said, anybody else have any other comments? Okay, then it's time to open up comments from the members of the public. So members of the public may address the board on any item within the board's jurisdiction. Cards which may be completed requesting to address the board are available at the back table and may be submitted to the board secretary at the meeting. The governing board allows speakers to speak on agendized and not agendized matter under public comment. Comments are limited to no more than 3 minutes per speaker. By law, no action may be taken on any item raised during the public comment periods, and matters may be referred to staff for placement on a future agenda of the governing board. And with that said, I believe we have our Supervisor Brown starting. No? Okay.
This order.
Trevor, is that Mexican? Thank you. Sorry about that.
Very close.
From Masensky. I live at 433 Arguello Way. I'm also our vice chair of our planning commission in our town, and I'm also a previous educator at UC Davis. So I actually came to talk to you this evening for a matter which has kind of recently arisen in all of our schools in our district. As you might be aware, everyone is kind of reacting and trying to figure out what to do with the tragedy that happened in Florida. I think our district is no different. I think along those lines, we have to try to, while I really appreciate that we empower our principals to do the best that they can, I think this is one of those issues that they might not have all the tools that they need. I think it's fair to say that, you know, my 6-year-old son Drake goes to Matthew Turner, and I would echo Trustee Morgan's comments about how awesome Mr. Slater is, and he's got more energy than I do, and I don't know where it comes from, but bottle it and sell it. But I would say that I think our principals are trying to solicit feedback, and the unfortunate thing is that it's not in a large enough forum, in my opinion, to be honest. I think that I understand that, you know, the district is in the process of updating their safety plans, and, you know, there's going to be training that's going to take place at the end of the year. I'd like to ask that we have a formal request for a public workshop to solicit information from our public prior to that update process. I know historically it's been a process in which we have really well-trained professionals come in and advise us on policy and what, you know, Department of Homeland Security is doing and CDE. However, I do think that there is really important issues related to how our community interacts with our students. We are that social glue. I'll point to that again. I think that, you know, the way that we're changing potential drop-offs and, you know, wanting to lock down the doors and not have parents being able to interact with our educators is a problem. I think that we need to consider that a little bit more. The second item I'd like to bring up is simply that I know that as part of the funding, we have about $150,000 that are allocated right now for, I think, what are categorized as safety improvements related to some grant funds that we're still waiting on. I don't think we can hear about until like June-ish. If it's possible, I know that there's millions of dollars in that, and we're planning for, you know, improvement in other schools. I do think that we need to make safety our top priority. And so if we could consider reallocating some additional funds for those additional safety improvements that come out of that plan recommendation process, I think that'd be advantageous, not only for the district, but just for the safety of the students. And, you know, lastly, I think that the the training and the requirements that are passed down from the state are one bar, right? I think we talk a lot about how we want to have our students excel and do things early. We were talking about our kindergartners reading. My kindergartner's learning how to read right now, and he's almost writing an entire sentence. We're trying to get him there. I think what I want to put on the forefront is that we need to go above and beyond related to safety in our communities, and having our safety plan have one mandatory evacuation that's required by state law, and not challenging our district to do something better so that we can ensure that our teachers are well prepared and trained is something that we do need to do better on. So with that, that's my time. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Laura Desang. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm the mom of a kindergartner at Joe Henderson, and the reason that I'm here tonight is because my kindergartner, who for the last 6 months has loved school and has thrived, told me that she doesn't want to go to school anymore because she doesn't feel safe there, and she's afraid that someone's going to come into her classroom and shoot her. And the reason for that is the policy changes. The shift in the atmosphere, the culture, it's a direct result of the new closed campus policy, how it's been handled, how it's been communicated, the poor communication really, and its forced implementation without fully realized procedures in place. I want to address 3 major points. The first is that the new policy fails all of the standards for parent and community involvement. The second is that it doesn't make any real improvements to safety, but rather it's intended to provide the illusion that we're taking action to improve safety in the face of national sentiment about student safety. And third is that this policy, particularly how it's been handled, is damaging our community and how our culture at our school is. My first point is that none of us were consulted beforehand. This week we had a meeting which was really well attended, despite the fact that it was very last minute and only announced on Facebook and communicated by word of mouth. The parents who were there were really engaged. They were full of questions, full of ideas. They even presented some ideas that are going to be implemented next week to help improve the policy. So that type of meeting really should have been the first step. There were questions there about procedure that couldn't be answered, that still aren't answered. For the process, no experts have been consulted on the impact it's going to have on the traffic patterns on Hastings. Including the increase in cars for parents who are dropping kids off, including the number of unaccompanied kids who are going to be walking in on that major thoroughfare now. There are no crossing guards and no stop signs. So that presents a major safety issue. In addition, parents are being encouraged to stand outside the gate with their children if they want to, which is going to be a lot of people in a very small space, which introduces the possibility of a crush, which is also not safe. My second point is that locking parents out doesn't really create a closed campus at Joe Henderson. There's a side gate that remains unlocked all day, which is accessed by parents of the after-school and preschool programs. There are human-sized holes in our fence. The green space is open and utilized by community programs. So barring parents from the drop-off area, all it does is deprive the school of extra watchful and caring eyes who know our kids the best. So it brings me to my final point about the community. The way the situation has been handled has made parents, and not just me, many parents have said this, it's made us feel like we're not welcome at the school. And despite being told that those of us who are cleared as volunteers would be allowed to continue to walk in with our school, our students in the morning, we were just told this week that that's not the case. Not even cleared parents will be allowed to go in. So I hope that you guys will address this issue and ask for this policy to be delayed until it can be better researched, better established, better procedures put in place, and all the additional safety procedures considered. Thank you.
I'm not sure I'm up to speed on the changes.
Well, that's what I was just going to say too. Could we get direction or information from staff on what? Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, our next speaker, Olivia Contreras.
Hi, my name is Olivia Contreras. I'm a sophomore at Benicia High School, and it has come to my attention that work to rule has happened again. I'm a strong believer that teachers are an invaluable resource to students. As students in today's world, we're often told that we are the future, and only we can truly change this world. We cannot do that, however, if our best resource is disappearing. Work to rule is an action where employees do no more than the minimum required by the rules of their contract and precisely follow all safety or other regulations, which may cause a slowdown or decrease in productivity as they are no longer working during breaks or unpaid extended hours. I know teachers who work for hours after school, tutoring kids until they get it right. I'm forever grateful to these teachers because they have helped me achieve so much, more than I personally thought that I could have before I met them. With work to rule, many teachers stop providing the service because simply they're not paid for it. Teachers are paid to work 7.25 hours a day for 5 days a week. Most of them stay even longer after school and continue to work on grading and such over the weekend. It is my opinion that teachers deserve an increase in the pay. The cost of living has increased, and it is expected to increase 3.1%. Our teachers have received no increase in their pay despite this rise in the COLA. This, combined with the lacking benefits they have, their health benefits only cover them. These teachers are people as well. They have families to take care of. If they're spending the majority of their paycheck just on providing basic health care for their family, how can they afford any other essentials? With our country's healthcare prices rising as is, it should be a given that one's job can provide them with access to that, especially teachers who are crucial to the functioning of our country. Students should always be first, and the best thing you can give us is quality teachers. Amazing teachers have already left our district to go where they are offered more benefits. And like so many of my classmates, I want to succeed. And to do so, to pass the test, to get the education I deserve, we need these teachers to stay and do anything we can to keep them here. Research has shown me that the district spending has increased in every department except the teachers and students. If you invest in these teachers, you are investing in the students. And isn't that what school is for? To better your students and hope that one day they will better our country and our world. West Virginia recently experienced a 9-day strike where teachers and students shut down all public schools in the state. This is an extreme case, but these teachers received exactly what they had been asking for. We don't want to have to stop school for a week because our teachers are not being paid what they work for. Why not pay them for what they work for? If that is done, we will all benefit. Benicia is a city known for its good schools. Families do not move here to live right next to a refinery. My own family moved here from South San Francisco for the school system here. So if our district truly cares about its students and wants to give them the best resources to achieve their goals, they will give our teachers a raise. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Piper Dean.
I believe this was supposed to be included in the student report section, but I'm Piper from Liberty High School, and these are what we've been up to. Liberty High School is getting ready for our Next Step event during the week of March 16th. The focus of this week is to prepare students for the workforce. Students will create a personal resume and be coached on how to complete an application. Local business owners and managers will run workshops on how to interview, deal with difficult coworkers, how to manage their social media persona, and a variety of other skills. Members of the Benicia Rotary will be conducting mock interviews with students and give them feedback on how they can improve. The Next Generation Art exhibit is up and running at Arts Benicia. We want to congratulate Thomas Voivodich for having his artwork purchased last weekend. We had 15 students attend Thoreau University's Teen Life Conference on Monday, March 5th, which had booths about jobs in the healthcare field, teen life information booths, physical competitions like rock walls and jump roping competitions, and how to stop judging other teens right off the bat. And then our last item is that we're going to start doing the Start with Hello campaign. In honor of the school shooting victims, we are leading this campaign to include student involvement and to stop bullying and social isolation. Thank you.
Hey, Piper,
Piper.
are you going to be the Liberty rep for the rest of the year?
I guess so.
So yes, you will be up here with the high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that got communicated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving that anyways. Okay, I'd like to, the next speaker is Marilyn Scrutchins. And then behind her will be Monica Brown, our supervisor.
Okay, good evening. So I am Marilyn Scrutchins. I've been a resident of Benicia for over 40 years. I had 4 children go through Benicia schools, and now I have grandchildren in actually attending Joe Henderson. The situation in Parkland hit me, as well as everyone in our country, hit me very hard. And instead of just wringing my hands, I said to myself, I have to take some kind of action. Even if it's just some kind of grassroots action, I have to do something. And I paired up with other organizers, and we are now creating our Benicia March for Our Lives, voila, which will be this coming Saturday, March 24th. We'll be meeting down at the foot of First Street, marching up First Street, and then we'll be having a rally with a variety of speakers, including several of our tremendous BHS students, some of whom are here tonight, along with some elected officials. I would, I'm personally inviting each of you folks to also attend our march. If you don't want to walk the whole mile, you can just sit at the park, and we'll be having the speakers speaking from the gazebo. I feel like it would be a very powerful gesture for you folks to be there, and I would like to add it is a nonpartisan event. And also, I would like to, because we have a number of speakers and we only have so much time, I cannot invite each of you to speak, but I would like to invite one of you to speak. So maybe you can draw straws and decide which one would like to speak, but we feel it would be very powerful and very moving if one of you would be willing to speak for approximately 3 minutes, along with some of our students and elected officials. I would like to just pass out some flyers about our rally and our march, and we certainly would be happy to see all of you there on Saturday. Thank you.
And what time do you have?
This Saturday the 24th. Not this Saturday, the following Saturday.
What time?
If you'd like to march, my recommendation is get down there at the foot of First Street at 9:45 so you can get a parking space, and then we'll be starting the march a little after 10 up to the park, and then the speakers will start between 11 and 11:15. On some of those forms, there's a place that you can, there's an email that you can send to let us know who would like to speak, and our MC for the night is also present, and that will be Steve Young, and we will be meeting with the speakers probably around 10:30, 10:45, and we'll figure out the order of the speakers. So again, we look forward to seeing you all. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, our next speaker is Supervisor Monica Brown. Monica, do you want me to introduce each student, or do you want them to do that?
Yeah, we've got it all organized.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll just...
Diane, you know me.
I do know you. That's why I'm asking.
I know. Thank you. No, I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. So good evening, everybody. My name is Monica Brown. I'm a retired teacher of 39 years. I was also a trustee at Solano Community College. So seniors, you can always come to Solano. It's relatively inexpensive. And yes, you can transfer to Berkeley because my daughter did it. And I'm currently the Board of Supervisor for District 2, which is Benicia. I am sure that many of you are aware of the movement March for Our Life. Yesterday, thousands of students across the nation peacefully assembled to remember the 17 victims of gun violence at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Tonight, there will be members of the public, students and parents, who will read to you a resolution that we would like to see placed on the next school board agenda. Due to the Brown Act, there was not time to submit the resolution to board members to have the item agendized for tonight. I ask that you listen to the voices of your community.
Hello, my name is Morgan Bundy, and I am a senior at Benicia High School, and I am here on behalf of Benicia students and as a member of the Benicia community. Tonight, I am joined by several other students, many of whom have helped organize and carry out community events in wake of the tragedy at Stoneman Douglas High School, including the vigil in honor of the 17 victims and the national walkout to end gun violence yesterday. I am also planning to speak at the Benicia March for Our Lives event on March 24th. I am here to state the resolution of the Benicia Unified School District against gun violence. Whereas in school communities from Columbine to Virginia Tech to Sandy Hook to Parkland, the lives of hundreds of students and school employees have been lost to the epidemic of gun violence. And
my name is Kara Fisher. I'm also a senior at Benicia High School. As Morgan stated, I'm another student who helped lead our walkout yesterday and the vigil before that, and I will also be one of the students speaking at the March 24th March for Our Lives. Whereas more than 153,000 students attending more than 171 primary and secondary schools have experienced a shooting on campus since the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. And
hi, I'm Grace French, and I'm also a senior at Benicia High School, and I've been participating and helping with all these events as well. Whereas hundreds of thousands of parents, guardians, and school employees have been impacted by the mental health toll of caring for children who have experienced gun violence in their schools. And
hi, my name is Shauna Williams. I'm also a senior at Benicia High School. I've also been participating in these events, and I'll be speaking on the March 24th March for Our Lives. Whereas there are more than 33,000 gun deaths per year in the United States, and
hello, I'm Dalia El-Ghanemi, and I'm a junior at Benicia High School. I've also been participating in the event, and I will be at the March 24th March for Our Lives. Whereas nearly 1,300 American children ages 0 to 17 die from shootings every year, and 5,790 are treated for gunshot wounds every year. And
hello, my name is Liam Madigan. I'm a junior at BHS, and I've also been involved in the movement, and I'll be speaking on the March 24th. Whereas Benicia Unified School District believes that the health and safety of our students and employees is our highest priority, and that a vibrant, healthful, safe, enriching, and equitable school environment is vital to ensure every student succeeds. And
hello, I'm Anthony Maselli, also a senior at Benicia High School. I've been participating in events as well, and whereas students have seized the conscience of the nation with their demand for strong action to reduce preventable gun violence, and that now is the time to pass common sense gun safety laws. And
hello, I'm a senior at Benicia High School. My name is Tina Zerga, and I will be marching on March 24th. Whereas the prevention of incidents of gun violence cannot be relegated to local school divisions alone, and the ongoing political inaction is failing our children. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Benicia Unified School District calls upon the United States Congress and the California state legislators to prioritize the protection of students and school employees by passing legislation that more effectively regulates the access to firearms in the interest of public safety, funds public health research on firearms related to issues, and advances public health sports.
Hello, my name is Sarah Lubker. I'm also a senior at Benicia High School, and I've also been participating in the events and will be marching in the March for Our Lives. Be it further resolved that the Benicia Unified School District finds that it is neither desirable nor appropriate to arm teachers in schools for any purpose, and will maintain existing prohibition of firearms at school, and will not support any effort to arm educators and staff. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you so much. Great job.
I just want to commend you guys for getting up and taking action around something that you believe in. And a lot of you guys are of almost a voting age, and you're our future. So and also just coming here and participating in, the civic process and the democratic process. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Steve Young and Sherry Zada. Is that correct? Mr. Young, you first, and then, well, I guess it doesn't matter. Is there an order to yours?
Good evening, Benicia School Board and guests, students. My name is Sherry Zada. I'm a retired librarian, elementary school librarian. I'm a wife, a mother, and a proud resident of Benicia. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. I am the co-chair, along with Marilyn, of the Benicia March for Our Lives event that is planned for Saturday the 24th at 10 o'clock in the morning. I want to let you know that I've not been an activist before. This is something completely off my radar. I'm simply an average person that felt that I needed to make a difference with what was going on across this country related to gun violence, especially in light of the recent school shootings. We have been working closely with the local high school students that are stepping up to make their voices heard. This march and rally is to support victims of gun violence. Additionally, we hope this event will inspire concrete legislative outcomes and motivate voters to stand up for common sense gun laws. School safety is not a political issue. There cannot be two sides to doing everything in our power to ensure the lives and futures of children who are at risk of dying when they should be learning, playing, and growing. The mission and focus of March for Our Lives is to demand that a comprehensive and effective bill be brought before Congress to address these gun issues. The Benicia March for Our Lives will coincide with over 750 marches worldwide. That was the last count, I checked this afternoon. Worldwide taking place on that Saturday. Our event is scheduled to begin with the march at First Street, which Marilyn went over, and end up at the gazebo with a rally. We have a number of student speakers and teachers and elected officials and representatives, including Solano County Supervisor Monica Brown, Benicia Mayor Elizabeth Patterson, and Benicia Vice Mayor Steve Young. I'm in communication with the Benicia Police Department and with the City of Benicia to ensure that we are all working together to make it a safe and peaceful march and rally. I want to personally take this opportunity to invite everyone here on the school board, students, teachers, educators, Benicia residents to participate in this march and rally on the 24th. I want to thank you for your time. We are doing this for our students, our safety, our people. They matter. Hashtag never again.
Hello, I'm Steve Young. I'm here as a private citizen, not as a member of the City Council. I'm here mainly to back up the students who are here. Working with them and planning this march has been very illuminating, and I've been so impressed by their level of commitment and how articulate they are. And I'm looking forward to hearing from them at the march. I hope one of you is able to join us on the podium to speak. I understand that Mayor Patterson has sent a joint resolution to the superintendent, and that one of the things that was unintentionally left off that resolution that hopefully you can put on there is the issue of not or explicitly saying that you will not be supporting arming teachers. Personally, I think it's a ridiculous idea, but that's a decision you're going to have to make. Switching gears for a moment, the city is undergoing, as part of our budgeting process, we're doing a new kind of budgeting. It's called priority-based budgeting, and towards that end, we are seeking community input in terms of what your priorities are, what the community's priorities are. There is another town hall survey that's up on the city website. It takes about 15 minutes to fill it out. We're hoping that people will take the time and tell the city council where your priorities are in terms of spending. There will also be a workshop at Matthew Turner School next Wednesday night at 6 o'clock on the same topic. So I'd urge the audience, people watching at home, and all of you to participate if you can, because we certainly value your input. Thank you.
Can I just echo the Vice Mayor's sentiment? So as you, President Ferrucci, you mentioned about lobbying our legislators, it's also important, the budgeting process. So as you know, the district pays for the police presence, part of the police presence at our sites, and I've heard indications that the city's contributions may be in jeopardy as well for the budgeting process. So it's really important that the community values, as we do, the support we get from the Benicia Police Department, and that those resources, if not continue, are augmented over time. It's really, really important, and that people do participate in the budgeting process and do think about how those resources are spent, and that the district's money used for education is actually having to pay for protection of the police department and involvement of the police. And it's very valuable, and we hope it continues, and I hope the city continues to support it and could allow the district to pay for education and not its own police protection.
I absolutely agree. Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan, for bringing that up. All right, so this has been quite an enlightening public comments. Learned a lot of amazing things going on in our community that I think we want to seriously consider moving with, so we can talk about that and look at future agenda for possibilities. Okay, with that said, we're going to move on to the consent calendar action items. So the consent calendar, all items listed under the consent calendar are considered by the board to be routine and will be approved by the board in one motion. There will be no discussion on these items unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items be pulled or discussed. With that said, do I have any comments on any of the consent calendar items? Now that
We do
everybody's
have
leaving.
gifts.
Oh, hold on, we still gotta,
Okay, with none said,
I move that we accept the consent calendar as presented.
okay, do I have a second?
And it's gonna be a roll call.
Okay, Mr.
President Ferrucci?
Yes.
Trustee Holgain?
Yes.
Trustee Monette?
Yes.
Trustee Morgan? Trustee Wing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now gifts.
Now gifts.
Down to discussion items.
Hold on, we got gifts.
We do have one gift to thank the community for. Phil Joy has provided a gift of $5,000 in cash to support BUSD crossing guards. We thank you very much for that.
That's a very generous gift.
So I just want to echo on Phil will never come to a meeting to accept appreciation, but Phil collects metal, and actually he provides a dumpster for metal on C Street and First Street. If you're going down, you make a right on C, the driveway on your right, there's a dumpster on your left-hand side before you go through that metal gate. All the money he gets from turning that scrap metal in, he donates it to the school. And he's been doing it every year for quite a few years. And so if you ever see Phil around, just tell him thank you for his donations. But, you know, if you have scrap metal, doesn't matter how big or small, throw it in the dumpster and he'll turn it in, and he'll, you know, his thing is mainly providing for crossing guards. But he has told us before, when we've had stuff fully funded, use it where the needs are. So thank you, Phil. I know we greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, with that being said, we're going to move on to discussion items. So 12.1, the local control and accountability plan.
And I'll turn it over to Dr. Beatson.
Thank you, trustees. I am really pleased and proud to have Ms. Stephanie Rice, Coordinator of Ed Services, review our mid-year data. As you know, we come back 3 times a year, once at the very beginning of the year. Typically, we go over our CASP state data with you and our elementary data. This point in the year, it's going to be middle and high school data, just because of how benchmark timing happens between quarter semesters and trimesters. And then we'll come back in June with some final data for you. So she's going to share some trends and next steps with you.
Good evening again.
That was a very emotional share out from our students, and I apologize if I seem a little flustered, but it really hit deep, so I just want to put that out there. So our outcomes for this session, at the conclusion, I hope that you have an understanding of our strengths, our areas of focus, and our next steps in our student performance data, both for BHS and BMS. Also, that you see the connections of our vision, WIGS, LCAP Goal 1, and next steps. With everything we do here in BUSD, everything is grounded with our vision. So I'd just like to remind us of that. Our vision, where all students achieve at their highest potential in an engaging, inspiring, and challenging learning environment. And if you can think about that like a funnel, so we have this overarching vision, and within that we have our beliefs and our characteristics of BUSD grads. And tonight I'm going to touch on a few specific ones. Education is a collaborative effort among students, staff, parents, guardians, and the community. Every student has a voice that deserves to be heard. Educational experiences for students and staff are continually improved through systems of accountability, and the desired characteristics of a Benicia grad, fully prepared and equipped for college and career in the 21st century. So within that funnel, we have our vision and our beliefs and characteristics, and then we have our WIGs, or our wildly important goals. And our wildly important goals that we're focusing on is to increase the overall student reach score from 65 to 75 by October in 2018. And to remind you, the reach is a survey given to middle school and high school students that focuses on developmental relationships and character strengths. And reach stands for relationships, effort, aspiration, cognition, and heart. Tonight, I'm going to focus on goal one of our 3 goals in our LCAP. And in goal 1, it's to create a collaborative team of highly engaged staff that supports the academic, emotional, and social successes of all students for college and career readiness. I have attached to this some progress monitoring documents. So I have grade level data charts. So if you would like to dig deeper into specific grade levels, which I'm not going to touch on tonight, it's provided for you. As well as I reattached the progress monitoring document from the LCAP. It's that red, yellow, green. Green meaning it's already completed, yellow in progress, and red that it has not been completed yet. And then we also have our BUSD LCAP progress report, and that document has all the annual targets, and it's compared to actual results. These both are lag data documents, meaning that a lot of the data does come from things such as CASP that we do not yet have the scores on. So we do have benchmark data put in, which we hope are predicting of what that final measure will be. And that document has actual percentages and numbers. To start with BHS, English Language Arts. One thing that you'll notice is that our local benchmarks continue to have consistency and alignment. We have alignment in our benchmarks from kindergarten through high school now. With that said, with the data that I'm going to share, not all data is complete yet, so we're working on that. The timeline of having data in and me sharing this out was very close, so we're still following up on that. The teachers have been working diligently on coming together on aligning their tests and benchmarks through LCAP days, that's content collaboration days, and department meetings in the secondary. Our 9th and 10th graders took a CASP readiness assessment, or an IAB, and their focus was on reading informational texts And our 11th graders took one focused on revision. This data that I'm sharing does not have our AP scores in it. In this data, you'll see that 90% of our students performed above or at near, and I'll jump to this, in our data. So when they take the CAST blind assessment, it breaks it down into 3 bands. We have the red is below standard, yellow is at or near, and they group them together because of that standard deviation, and green is above. Overall, they're showing steady performance and some growth in all performance bands from the last time I reported to you. BMS have consistency and alignment as well. 6th through 8th grade took an IAB, a CASP readiness assessment, focused on research this time. And 80% of the students performed in the above or at near standard. Overall, they're showing steady performance and some growth in the above standard area. One delta that we did notice is there is a small increase in the below standard band, and that's something that the teachers will be discussing when this data is returned to them so that they can analyze it further. Our student groups. We discussed our student groups with you a few times now, and those student groups were identified through our CASP as having a significant achievement gap, and that was our African American students, our socioeconomically disadvantaged students, our students with disabilities, and our English language learners. And as we presented last time, we shared our data with you, and we were charged through you to make sure that we were doing something with our teachers to make a difference for these students with this learning gap. And what we'll see in this data is that BHS students with disabilities that are performing below standard, the percentage decreased from 49% to 37%. BHS students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged performing below standard also decreased from 25 to 19%. We want to see that decrease. BMS students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged performing below standard decreased from 38% to 31%. So with these 4 groups, our teachers are also looking at these individual groups as well as the groups as a whole when they have their discussions on how the students are doing. And that's BHS ELA student groups, 9th through 11th grade, and BMS 6th through 8th grade. Also in our data story, we have math. They also consistently continue to align their assessments. BHS Math Department is actually working tomorrow on one of their LCAP content collaboration days to do just that. This reflects their Integrated 1, Integrated 2, and Integrated 3 courses. And they all gave the Unit 6 assessment from their content curriculum CPM. In this data, you'll notice that 61% performed at or above standard, and their below standard has decreased from 32% to 17%. Our BMS teams are also continually working to have consistency and alignment. Our 6th grade teachers are meeting tomorrow also for a content collaboration day. Our 6th through 8th grade students took the MDTP, which is a mathematics diagnostic test through UC Davis. They took the same test, less problems. They gave the same problems and it grew this time. And 55% of our students performed at or above, which is an increase from 49% the last time they gave this assessment. One notice again, though, is that the below standard group has increased, so that's something that we'll be looking into with our teachers. That's our BHS math, 9th through 11th, integrated 1, 2, and 3. Actually, it could be 12th as well because it's integrated 1, 2, and 3. And then our 6th through 8th grade math. Our student groups. BHS, African American students performing below standards, has decreased from 64% to 42%. 57% of BHS students with disabilities have met or exceeded standard. At BMS, the English language learner students increased in exceeding standard from 8% to 18%. And at BMS, students in all student groups have stayed fairly consistent where they were in the last benchmark period. So then what are we doing to support our students? We are providing some vertical articulation. And this year we're doing a lot of that through our coaches in alignment in math and ELA from 5th to 6th grade. Results are provided to sites for analysis. Student group lists with data are provided to sites to have ongoing discussions through their meetings. Culturally responsive teaching is being explored. CASP item blueprints. We just did some work with representatives from several grade levels, and it's going to happen throughout the district, 3rd through high school, that they're working with the CASP blueprints to align it to what they're doing in their everyday teaching in our curriculum. Analyzing benchmark alignment with curriculum and CASP. And BHS teachers this year are providing opportunities for student support during their access period. And then what I'm going to discuss next really goes hand in hand with our students having their voice and the article that Peter Morgan brought to us this evening. It's just very much connected. And Ed Services is planning to work together with our District Curriculum Council, DCC, and PAR and students. And with that, with our District Curriculum Council, we are wanting to have more teacher and student presence. And with that, we want to expand the scope of the work that the committee will be doing, working on projects from the beginning and seeing it through to the end. And then exploring with this group of teachers and students a model called Keep, Stop, Start, which I heard from when I heard Zaretta Hammond, author of Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, speak. You need to decide what you're going to keep, what we're doing well, what's strong. And then we decide what we can stop doing before we decide what we're going to start doing. So using this process with our District Curriculum Council and students to have that community voice. And really the heart of everything we do, we know are our students. And trying to find a way to elicit more student voice, to hear what they need from us and what they think a good learning environment in BUSD is. We do have our measure, which is the REACH survey. So we do want to work with our committee to dig deeper into that and really utilize it to use student voice in what we do. And again, exploring that culturally responsive teaching and seeing what next steps we can do to have an even better Benicia Unified. Thank you.
Thanks,
Questions?
Steph. You have a question? Oh, okay. I have one question
Sure.
of you. One of the comments I heard last week when I was hitting one of the schools was as they're beginning to work with some of the CASP blueprints and tests and the practice tests, that they're really seeing that they're going to need to focus on the vocabulary. And it's not, I don't mean the vocabulary section, but the vocabulary that's used in the test.
Yes.
So I'm taking that to mean that it's very different than what's in our curriculum and the material that you're using. Is that
Well, there's two parts.
Okay.
So we've had teachers giving the interim assessments, and some of, especially I've heard from the third grade, that some of the language in the questioning is different than what they've used. So that's been a notice. We had a team of teachers here last week. Gary popped in, and we had representatives from third through high school here, and they were taking the CASP blueprints. So the CASP blueprints breaks down the claims, the overarching themes, down to what standards are assessed, and it goes even deeper and gives you the academic language or vocabulary utilized. Now, the work that was started, and it was started. It's not a quick process. This isn't going to be something that's overnight. But what was started was our teachers in elementary were working with the everyday math, and they were going through all the academic language from the CASP blueprints, and they were comparing it unit by unit for everyday math. For example, 5th grade, they listed all the vocabulary. One, just to bring it forthright for the teachers again, you know, when you go to teach them, especially if you've taught something and are really comfortable with something, you kind of let your teacher's edition go and you get out there and do your thing. But having a kind of a cliff note version of, I'm going to quick check myself on this academic language and make sure I cover that when I go out there. So they started that. And in 5th grade, I believe there were only 2 words on the CASP vocabulary blueprints that were not addressed through our program. So the teachers were feeling very confident in what they were finding there. The middle school math representatives were also finding close alignment with our CPM, especially through the question stems that we were looking at and the way they asked the questions in CPM. They were cross-referencing and finding where there were holes so that they can go in and fill that in. And so, yes, there might be some discrepancy in the academic language, but that is something that we have already started the process to address, and we have a team working just to front load it so that all teachers don't have to go out and do that same work themselves. We're going to provide that for teachers in grade levels.
Okay, that's great, because that really could be kind of frustrating. You're out there, you're working, and you know your kids know what they need to be able to do, and yet they don't understand the new term.
Yes.
And that it always seems to me like they're tricking them that way. But anyways, just thought I'd ask for clarification. So thank you.
I just want to say that I appreciate all the work that is going into setting the stage for being able to do this, because I think that's important so that we can build the culture over time. And I did note that everything that says not met yet. So I appreciate the goals.
It will be. All right. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, are there any comments on 12.1? Any speakers? Okay, then I'm going to move on to 12.2. Oh, you lost it this time. The first reading of the following board policies, that's the BP and the AR 6020, which is parent involvement, 6161.1, which is the selection and evaluation of instructional materials, BP 6170.1, which is transitional kindergarten, and BP 6178.1, which is work-based learning. Dr. Young?
Yep, you bring these to you as we do every couple of weeks to update our policies, and we have the BPRC, Board Policy Review Committee, and Ms. Verrucci is on that, and Ms. Monette. So here they are. But for your, if you have any comments for us or questions, and you know, usually these kind of often feel pretty routine in nature. I'd say these sort of these updates, not any big changes to our practice.
Are there any comments from the board? Are there any comments from the audience on the board policy? Okay, with none being on, whoops, I am going to move on to number 13, item number 13, which is a non-consent item. That is consideration and approval of the intent to employ with a provisional internship permit with extended language. And I assume that is Dr. Gill.
Thank you. So this was one of those items. Actually, this teacher, Kathleen Sauter, has been working with us since the beginning of this year. We actually had brought this to the board agenda several months back. So when this document was submitted, which was typically submit, there was a phrase that was written differently. Instead of saying specifically 100% FTE, special education, moderate disability teacher at Liberty School, it didn't have that description. It still said it will be a resource moderate teacher, but didn't have Liberty School. So we received it back from CTC a couple of weeks ago saying you need to word like this. Even though we checked at that time with CTC, because this is a common thing for HR people to do. We do this often. And at that time they said this is what you need, but now we need to be a little more specific. It's more of a formality than anything else, that the teacher already has been working. Everything is as usual. It's just the specific language now they want us to use, which is, we just need you to prove that. So we can submit it back to CTC and continue with her teaching.
So we need to reapprove her employment, is that correct?
Reapprove
New
her
language.
PIP, yes.
Okay, are there any comments from the board? Okay, then can I call for a motion, please?
I move that we approve Kathleen Sauter to be employed as a 100% FTE special education mild moderate disabilities teacher at Liberty High School for the 2017-18 school year. She will be serving students in grades 10, 11, and 12 and will be employed on the basis of provisional internship permit.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to 13.2, which is the review and approval of the 2017-18 interim financial report for the Benicia Unified School District. Mr. Rejo.
Good evening. Yeah, we have the second interim financial report for your review and approval tonight. We'll start with our Excel sheets here with our revenues and expenditures and some pie charts. So what revenues are budgeted by our school district for 17-18? Our revenues are at $44.4 million. Most of that is provided by the state of California through the local control funding formula. That's based on a per student dollar amount, and that's about 87% of our revenues. So they're coming in at about $38.7 million. In addition to that, we get some state funds, a little bit of federal funds, and some local other funds through donations, and some of our special ed funds come through that local line. So of that LCFF, or the state local control funding formula, that $38.7 million, it's just to note in the bottom left-hand corner that here in Benicia, our local property taxes cover about 37% of our LCFF, and the balance of that comes directly out of the state of California budgets, the other 63%. On the next slide are our expenses budgeted for 17-18 at $46.3 million. We basically have our salary and benefits for our certificated and classified employees, which is right around 86% of our budget, which it has been for the last several years. And then the remainder, 15% or so, is provided for supplies, operations, services, and capital outlay. So as we look at the difference between our revenues and our expenditures in the bottom left-hand corner, it's about a net operating deficit of about $1.9 million. About $1 million of that is ongoing in nature, and the other $900,000 is one time. At the end of this school year, we have a fiscal year that ends on June 30th, 2018, and we project out what we would be left with after this year's operations. And the fund balance would be just over $5 million at $5.2 million, and that provides for the state's required 3% reserve for uncertainties, as well as our local board policy reserve, which is about an additional 4% at $2 million. The remainder, $1.8 million for restricted programs. The majority of that is the state one-time grant. That's about, of that amount, it's about 1.3 million. And as the state has been providing one-time grants to school districts over the years, we have developed kind of a multi-year plan. It's a lot of money to spend all at once, and so the districts have been following that plan to spread it out over several years. We want to point out in this next slide the amount of monies that our district, as well as all other districts, are paying into our employee retirement pensions. And this top section is the retirement plan for STRS, which covers our teachers and other certificated employees. And this gives us an idea that middle column called base amount, that's what we would pay regardless of these recent increases that all school districts are required to pay into those pension plans. And so that column off to the right a little bit for the additional amount, those are the additional amounts that we have been required or will be required based on current projections to pay into those retirement plans, such that when our employees go to retire, those plans have enough money to cover their pensions, their monthly pension checks. So you can see up at the top, that additional amount, it started back in 2014-15, and we kind of project out, they posted what they project those additional increases are. And so just for our STRS retirement plan, our school district alone would be paying an additional $2,448,000 over those 7 years into the STRS retirement plan. So about another $2.5 million had we not had to do that, those funds would have been available to us for other purposes. But we're making those contributions into the STRS plan. You can scroll down to the bottom half.
Tim, before we move on, is it expected to stay at 19.1% from 2021 on?
A very good question. Those are the only published rates that we have for the STRS retirement at this point in time. We'll continue to monitor that. We haven't received any information that goes beyond that year. But I would assume as that date approaches, they do additional projections and would provide us that information.
Can we assume it's not going down?
We will assume flat at the moment at that 19.1%.
So Tim, have you heard any more? Because they mentioned on Tuesday the idea of moving, and Mr. Morgan can better explain this out once I give him the time. I guess right now we're projecting 30 years. They're looking at the make recouping within 30 years. They're talking about shortening it to 20. And they said that will be a significant change.
Yeah, so they're thinking about shortening the amount of time because they weren't meeting their investment return targets, and so what they want to do is ask employers and employees to contribute more sooner. And so whether they do that over 30 years or 20 years, and if they shorten that, that means they're going to be coming after us and employees for more sooner. At the same time, there's also reports that say that the investment portfolio is performing slightly better. And so would those additional investment returns offset what if they are considering to do to shorten that payback period? So at this point, these rates that are on this page are what have been published. And so we're using those. And again, just continue to monitor it monthly and with each of our financial reports. So
Assemblyman Frazier announced to the group that I was in that in fact the state is now making their payments to the STRS portion, the portion that California is supposed to be putting in, and that they were going to make a commitment to begin resuming those payments, which they haven't made in a very long time. So they're kind of hoping that that will help to alleviate the issue for PERS and STRS as well. Time will tell. I'm really hoping. That's what we talked about. It's the Budget Act that I mentioned before.
I have a question about this. So, obviously the stock market's been falling recently, and I mean, maybe you know something about this, Peter, too. But I mean, how dependent are we for the in terms of these projections on kind of, you know, a relatively healthy market. You know, if there's a big flux or big change, would this significantly impact the projections for what we're going to be paying into this?
Definitely, yeah. And I think what we do, again, we just monitor this with every financial report, and as they update their records at the state level, they pass that along to us pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense what you're saying, but I also just in my mind, I imagine like it seems like potentially volatile. I mean,
I think there's a lot of uncertainty, which makes me extremely uncomfortable about our budget and our lack of reserve. But the press in the last month has been while the market is volatile, and it always will be, the press and the studies in the last month do not suggest the state will meet any of its projections. The impact of the federal tax changes has not been factored into any of the state's thinking yet. The recent survey in the Bay Area that 1 in 2, 50% of Bay Area residents are contemplating moving out of the state and can no longer afford to live in the Bay Area. That large corporations and the highest ranks of CEOs who pay a very disproportionate portion of the state budget, I mean the state's revenue, is heavily weighted towards the highest earners, the way the state does the taxes, are looking for different locations for their headquarters because of the tax impact. Texas, Nevada. The news today from several of the research firms and the Wall Street banks is that in the next 3 years, there is a 100% chance of recession. That we are at the tail end of the growth we've seen. The state cannot do what the federal government does and run a deficit. It will not make those projections. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, and it's just life and normal cycles. Challenge is the way California has positioned itself vis-a-vis the federal government is not boding well for the state of California. And the way the state earns its revenues today has been very dependent upon the tech industry, the industries that are subject to those boom and bust cycles. So I don't know. These budgets we've been doing for years, I think, have us on a path to ruin, and I can't believe we continue, having to cut and still run deficits. It's going to be painful.
So I have a question. So I've been asked this a few times, and I think you're covering it, and I'm sure you maybe more will, Tim. But I'm wondering how much this plays into our increased expenses in terms of, because we've gotten more money this year than last, but also our expenses have gone up. And is this? I'm assuming this is part of it. Are there other pieces as well?
Great question. That's on the very next slide, but let me just talk through this last section on PERS, and then the next slide will help answer that. So the bottom part is our PERS retirement. That's for our classified employees. And again, it's kind of set up the same way. The additional impact dollar-wise isn't as much as the top half. We do have less classified employees in our district. But basically, you can see the rate increasing, over 2% over the next 3 years, and the additional amount that we're paying for. So in the PERS retirement system, over 7 years, we would put in an additional $744,000 that had the rate stayed flat back in 13-14. Those funds could have been used for something else. On the next page is kind of some key fiscal factors. It's not everything. It just attempts to pick out some of the bigger ticket items that talks about, where does our money go? And up at the top, kind of start with our known salary related costs. And what we do is we have 3 columns up there. The first one is for our current 2017-18 fiscal year. And then the middle column is for next year, 18-19, and then the second year out for 19-20. So we have salary schedules in our school district for employees, and there's movement on that. If you go up on the salary schedule, there's additional salary costs that are new to the district. And so those are at $450,000 this year. It gets a little bit more in the outer years. In addition to that, it used to be that was kind of the big known additional cost for school districts. But since STRS and PERS has been increasing, those retirement plans have been increasing the rates that they charge us each year. There is an additional cost that comes out of our new budgets each year. And right now that's at about $530,000 for this year, and then $571,000 next year. So for the next several years, as these known rate increase are known, they will be updated. We have to come up with that money and make those payments into those pension plans.
And Tim, I just want to connect that slide with the earlier slide. But that last column, 1920, means we are operating with no reserve above the state minimum.
So not quite. Let's go through the other list down below, because in addition to that, there are some additional operating costs in that second item. These are the key ones, the bigger ones. There's a bunch of other small ones as well, but we look at our special ed budget as well as our facility routine restricted maintenance account. And so this year there was another $200,000 required for those programs. In the outer years, it's about $85,000 and $33,000 in the outer year. We also look in the middle section on number 3. Remember back on the revenue slide, our biggest revenue is the state LCFF, and that gets generated based on the number of students we have, not just enrolled, but their attendance. And so we look at our attendance, and we are heading towards a third year of declining enrollment. Now, we don't think next year, 2018-19, is going to be as big a decline as we've had the last 2 years, but we do see a decline mainly at the elementary school. We're going to monitor the middle school a lot closer because we're projecting that to be flat. We're meeting with the principals again next week to follow up on that. But right now we are projecting a slight decline next year, which means eventually that'll catch up with us and have less LCFF funds.
What do you base your projections on? Is it just anecdotal information, or are you pulling data from demographic studies, or how do you decide one year to the next whether you're projecting a decline, flat, an increase?
Right. So we do our own analysis internal. So we roll forward the grade levels, and historically that's been pretty close. When you just roll the grade levels forward, for example, first graders become second graders next year. And then at 5th grade at the middle school, there is an additional bump from students outside of our public schools. There are 6th graders that come from outside of our district, and that could be in the range between 20 and 30, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less some years. So that's kind of the wild card, and that's where we work with the middle school staff to say, hey, what are you hearing? What are your expectations there? And then a couple years ago, the district did do a demographic study. And so we have that to refer back to. They are reporting, if I remember correctly, more of a little bit stable, maybe a little bit of a bump, but that's built off of the current year, which was when they did their study, they were projecting a little bit more. So since we didn't reach that this year, their outer numbers are a little bit off. So,
I'm sorry, I missed. What year was that study done?
The demographic study, it was either 1 or 2, it was probably 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe 1 year ago. Okay. And then, and the one kind of, the calculation with that is the state does give you a hold harmless so that if you do decline in enrollment, they don't take the funds away from you the current year. They give you a hold harmless for a year, but you do get deducted the following year. So that eases the pain a little bit if you have an unexpected decline, but eventually that does catch up with you that second year. Of note, Again, we're reminded that this is Governor Brown's last state budget. And so he proposed in January a state budget for next year, which includes fully funding state LCFF at 100% for 18-19. It's a couple years ahead of time. The LCFF, the calculation, there was a built-in target at 2 years out, so we weren't supposed to get there for another 2 years, but Governor Brown and the performance of the state has allowed him to propose a budget that includes funding that fully in 2018-19. He'll come out with a May revise in May, and then the legislature needs to vote on that for an official budget in June. So we continue to monitor that. We will go to that May revise workshop. One last big thing in that LCFF is we get a little 20% bump in the per student funding for students who are either English learners from low-income families or foster youth. And so we are right around 24%. We used to be about 22%, so we've seen that increase a little bit over the last couple of years. So that provides a little bit more funding, which goes into supplemental funds is what they call that. So we look at section 4, we look at additional revenues. So this kind of, this recognizes the additional monies that come in that can help us pay for all that stuff we were just talking about. But we do have to adjust that downward for our declining enrollment or our declining ADA. And so if we were, the purpose of that section is to kind of show you that when we do decline in enrollment and ADA, it really does take money away from us. If we were stable, like Benicia had been prior to the last few years, those would be additional funds into our district as well. So instead of getting that full funding, we take out the funding that is related to the reduction in enrollment and ADA. So this year, it was just under $300,000 that we received. Next year, it'd be about $1.5 million. And in that outer year, 1920, again, that's just a multi-year projection. It's what's coming from that number will change, but right now that's about $847,000. So those are the new revenues that we get, and you can see if you compare them that in some cases it's not sufficient to cover those costs. You do add back also in number 5 for our budget adjustments for staffing. So when we have been declining enrollment, we've been able to adjust staff to serve that number, that lower number, which with less staff. So as we reduce that, those would be savings also that we could apply to those costs. So you can kind of add up those numbers. There's some other things going on outside of that, but basically at this point in time, those outer 2 years are about break even. This year, one of the things that's not on here is the current one-time expenditures. So that's why if you add that first column up, there's another $900,000 in one-time carryover type expenditures. So the questions were raised a little bit earlier. What kind of new monies are we getting, and what are the big items that we're faced with? Is attempted to be summarized on that page. The next slide up at the top, we do summarize our projected fund balance, or I'm sorry, the projected deficit or slight surplus in the outer years. So we are operating at a $1.9 million deficit right now. And in that outer year, in 18-19, it would be a slight surplus, about $200,000. But at this point in time, that would be needed to cover a slight deficit in 19-20. So it kind of collects money a little bit ahead of time for that outer year. Down in the bottom section, we look at what our projected fund balance are for the current and the outer 2 years. It's just over $5 million, again, providing for the state's 3%, our local board policy 4%, and then those restricted programs, which again, in that $1.8 million is 1.3 million of that is the state one-time grant, which will be spent down. So what this projection shows is as we put that budget in for those outer years and spend those one-time funds down, that reserve will also go down.
Are there going to be any more one-time funds?
So in 18-19, yes, there is about $1.3 million projected, proposed by the governor for the Benicia School District. So we've included that in these numbers.
That's why that stays the same, because we're spending some, but we expect to get some additional funds next year. Okay.
Yes. The next few slides are just different graphs of information we have already presented, basically showing a bar chart for our mandatory reserves in 18-19, about $100,000 in one time. And the last slide, that's okay, kind of charts our net operating loss or revenue off to the right-hand side of that graph. And you can kind of see it's kind of been up and down over the years, depending on when we spend our carryover funds. Our goal is always to operate as close to break even as possible, but if we do carry over large sums and spend it in another year, that can go below the line.
You won't have it now, but could you give us data that shows during periods of recession how much our revenue increases? I would assume the 2008-9 timeframe that was extraordinarily large, but there have been prior recessions. And so it'd be interesting to know, for planning purposes, is it a 5% increase in revenues, 10%, 20%, and for how long?
Mm-hmm.
So it gets back to normal. Realizing that 8 and 9 were a bit of an outlier in severity, but you know, if we had a 10% decline in revenue from the state, we don't have a reserve to get through that. So, you know, how would you make up a $4 million or $5 million decline in revenue from the state? Everything else being equal. You have to close a school. What would you do? And that's the kind of discussion I think we need to have about whether or not our budgets are adequate. I think the past would inform the thinking of that, and we all think about the last recession, but there have been lots of recessions. And so what would be expected in a normal recession in terms of the state?
Sure. Okay, and then the last few slides attempts to summarize kind of where we're at with our certification. It's on the PowerPoint, yes. And so it's our goal to provide a positive financial certification, which is based on the state's adopted budget for 17-18. The outer years are based on the governor's proposal. We do use that state's local control funding formula and provide for both the state 3% reserve and a local board policy reserve. That LCFF, it's 87% of our revenues. It's the biggest part of our revenues. So that's how the state is funding public schools right now. I did mention that the governor's proposing that to be fully funded in 18-19 after the 2018-19 school year. Since it would be at the target level, the following years would go back to the old cost of living allowance calculations. So some districts have enjoyed more than the COLA under the LCFF calculation, and after 18-19 under the current calculation, there are proposals to change that. There's proposals to increase the base. So if that stuff happens, then it would be something beyond just the COLA. But right now, that's what we have in our multi-year projections. For 17-18, that LCFF provides $8,278 per student. We also get a 20% increase for those students in one of those three categories. And just to repeat, we have about 24% of our students who are English learners from lower income families or foster youth. The LCAP is a guide with our budget with Dr. Beatson and her efforts in that goes hand in hand with our budget and our LCFF funding.
Is that 20% supplemental funding that we get above the LCFF available for any purpose, or is it dedicated towards?
Yeah, our district and every district must provide documentation and explanation on how we use our supplemental funds, which is generated for those students in one of those 3 categories. So what about budget cuts? So what we've done so far, again, based on the approved state budget for the current year, our current trend of declining enrollment, we have already adjusted our budget for next year in 18-19 by about $800,000. So we've adjusted staff downward to more closely match our decline in student enrollment over the last couple years. We are going to update this information in May when the governor comes out with his last May revised budget proposal for 18-19. What he does is work with the Department of Finance on all current trends, on all current state revenue projections, and puts his May revised together in mid-May, which is what we will use to put together our school budget. And then based on that information, we bring it back to you at the last meeting in May and then ask for your final approval in June. Multi-year projections will be updated at the same time. And the last bullet is a special note that our contract negotiations have been settled for the prior year, but we are in negotiations currently for the current year and for any outer years as well. And so we are still in that process. We have not included any types of costs in these numbers. So that's just a note that if there's costs associated with negotiations, that these numbers would be adjusted accordingly.
They'd have to come out of the reserve, right? We're pretty far into the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be either reserve for this year and then conversations about budget priorities and LCAP and all that for outer years. Additional adjustments or cuts. Any additional costs would add to a deficit. Right now for 18-19, given what we have in the budget, it's projected to basically be at a break-even or a slight surplus. Our next steps is to have you approve the second interim financial report tonight. That gets filed as it does each time with our Solano County Office of Education and the California Department of Education. And I mentioned earlier, the May revise will provide an update, which we'll report back to the school board and include that in our draft budget for the end of May and the final budget in June.
I know.
She's getting her.
It's like, okay, fine. Any other comments from the board or any other questions from Mr. Rejo? Any other comments from the public before we make a motion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for a recommendation from the board.
I recommend that we approve the 2017-18 second interim financial report for Benicia Unified School District.
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, with that said, that adjourns our meeting. I want to thank you, everyone, and those of you that hung in there with us this evening. So thank you. This meeting is adjourned.